The best jobs number in 2 years, but our next guest says don't get too excited just yet. We've still got a long way to go here now. Lynn Tilton, who describes herself as a self-made billionaire who has helped save 150 companies. She's smiling about that. That sounds pretty good. Helped save 150 companies from liquidation and 250,000 jobs. The CEO of Patriarch Partners, that's a $7 billion private equity firm. Welcome, Lynn, to Power Lunch. The president in the last hour seemed to zero in on the idea that banks aren't lending at the rates they should. I know that the idea of extending credit to middle and smaller businesses is something you believe very strongly in. Why hasn't that happened, and what needs to happen to make it happen?
Well, I think, first of all, the TARP money was given with no mandate to lend, and banks did what they thought was best for the banks, which is to use that money to rebuild their balance sheets. But in the end, the thing that every economy is built on is jobs. It's when we go to develop countries, we all start with infrastructure so we can build manufacturing facilities so we can create jobs. We're working the opposite way here. We're trying to work from output to employment. We need to work from employment. The way you create jobs is small and mid-sized businesses. 80% of your workforce is in small and mid-sized businesses. They haven't been lent to during this crisis. So there's been a slow walk to liquidation that no one's talking about, which is why you have 5.9 million people at 27-plus weeks. That's the populace of the permanently unemployed. You're still losing manufacturing jobs. Small businesses have no access to capital.
How do you get the credit flowing again?
What do you do?
Well, I put a program in front of Treasury 6 months ago to use, $30 billion of TARP money with $10 billion of, in private investor money in a PPIP that would do rescue lending to small and mid-sized companies. I mean, we've saved 250,000 jobs in the last 9 years by saving 150 companies that would otherwise liquidate by giving them money. Other people said they didn't deserve to live. We've rebuilt value, kept people working.
How do you counter the private equity image, which is really about stripping jobs and rolling companies over and over again and just loading them up with debt? I mean, do you think maybe your message wasn't heard because private equity doesn't necessarily have the credibility?
Look, in the end, what creates credibility, right? I mean, in the end, you've got to look at truth. We're not typical private equity. We actually buy companies that other people toss on the heap of creative destruction. I don't believe in that. I believe that ultimately you can rebuild value. And when you take something that someone would otherwise toss away and those jobs would be gone, and you rebuild it, then ultimately those jobs that stay are actually numbers that can be quantified and edified. So it's not self-proclaimed, it's actually provable. And I think it's important. If you look at the lending numbers, the 22 largest TARP-infused banks have small business lending down by $10.5 billion. If you look at the FDIC report, lending's dropped across banks by $210 billion. The largest drop since 1984 when they started to actually count. So these are real numbers. And so I think you need a rescue loan program. And that doesn't mean you're giving money away, because the money that we've made at our firm, the money I've made, has all been done by creating jobs in this country.
You've got investments in companies that make bedding. You've got investments in China. You've got investments, I think I saw, in making fire trucks, et cetera, right? How does the economy look to you right now?
I think the economy is terrible. I mean, look, we have 30 million Americans that are suffering, whether they're only part-time employed and they want to be long-time employed. But we've got 30 million Americans suffering. That literally could affect 120 people. That leaves children behind. People aren't spending. Look at the
stimulus plan. A lot of people are saying we need a second stimulus plan. You think that's
look? I think the whole point of throwing money up in the air and hoping it trickles down is not the way. I think right now we need a direct solution to the problem. The problem is we need to create jobs in this country. The reason that we don't have jobs is small and mid-sized businesses are where job creation is. They don't have access to capital. We need to create access to capital. That doesn't mean giveaway loans. That means smart loans that are secured by assets that can get paid back. But there needs to be the same sense of urgency in creating jobs that we had when we were trying to keep banks from failing.
What about those banks who say, one, they have to have higher capital standards, that the pressure is on them for a better balance sheet, and as a result of that,
I think that's true.
And as a result of that, they're reluctant to lend right now until the overall economy improves and the regulators get off their back. Is there any?
Yeah, well, that's why I'm thinking it should be a PPIP. Instead of buying toxic assets, which is never going to happen because the big banks have come back and the FASB rules changed, Take $30 billion, use the private sector, let them be the first loss layer, and get them to make these rescue high-risk loans. Banks, even if they could, wouldn't make these kind of loans. You need high-risk loans at higher interest rates made to companies desperate for capital to stay alive. That will keep people working. That will stimulate employment. It's kind of easy. Problem, solution.
All right,
well, Treasury watches, so I'm sure they heard the message.
They've seen the message before.
I'm sure
Lynn Tilton, thank you very much.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.